there's nothing better than a crisis to produce leaders and then acknowledge those leaders. And I love those situations. I try to avoid it as much as I can, running great project management services, like you said, or creating realistic expectations across estimations, which is very hard to do, especially in software, because business people think that you push a button and everything happens at once, like it was a magic one, and it's not. It's hard and complicated.
It's complicated, a lot of pieces, right? Yeah.
Welcome to the Leaders in Tech podcast. This podcast is being set with one purpose in mind: to show the world how can we use people and technology to make companies thrive, not only survive. As everybody knows, technology has been advancing dramatically throughout the last 100 years, really. To give you an idea, my grandmother, she was born in 1903, and we still had dirt roads and horses on downtowns. That's how fast technology has evolved. The problem is that we're putting the emphasis in technology and we're forgetting about the business. And if you are following this podcast, you realize that if we don't have leaders in technology that knows how to inspire their people and apply technology to better the world through business outcomes, technology is meaningless. So how do we do that? By inviting amazing leaders like JT Kennedy here, who has been developing a beautiful leadership in their careers really since the beginning of their professional life. So JT, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. JT, for the audience, can you please tell me your full name, where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
Sure. My name is JT Kennedy. I live in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And I'm a senior director of product development at ION Commodities. So I have a developer background and now manage a division of software development for ION.
Beautiful. So can you please just for the audience, what does ION do and how big they are?
Sure. So ION has a lot of different, divisions that are in different areas. I work for ION Commodities. There's like ION Treasury, ION Markets, but it's basically for financial trading, commodity trading, and there's solutions, right across the board to help business to business mostly, but to help them manage risk on the market. And manage really their daily business, everything that they need to do, their billing, their contracts, invoicing, everything like that. Other divisions of ION, are more financial based. So, like Bank of Canada, is one of their customers. And specifically where I work is more on the agricultural side. So our clients use our software, commodity trading, risk management, CTRM, to help their, manage their contracts with producers, and everything from receiving goods from producers like corn or grain or something like that, all the way down to managing their risk and settlement, with that. So. Very That's financial, amazing. Business-focused software. I've been here for the last 12 years, and I actually was a developer that worked on the team before for a couple of years, way back.
That's beautiful. And what an example of this podcast, right? You are helping farmers, people that feed the world, manage the finances so that they can actually deliver their products into the mouths of people, and still make a profit. Yep. From the whole food chain, the whole supply chain, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's really supply chain management, right? And managing everything there, shipping, receiving goods, merchandisers or people even like companies that are like a flour producer or something like that. Like they'll use our software to figure out how much money that they're making and where their risk is, right? Because because they're commodities in the open market, they're always changing prices, and so they're at risk for agreeing at one price and then the price changes by the time harvest comes, right? So they can use our software to help them make business decisions, with that.
Mitigate that, and which is so important, especially nowadays after COVID, everything changed. It's funny, I run a very successful IT consulting firm. We write business programs to help businesses grow. And it reminded me of an application we just finished for a client. They're one of the largest importers of rubber from China into the USA, raw material. And during the pandemic, because of the problems with the supply chain, ship containers became very expensive.
Yeah.
So they hired us to build AI-based algorithms where we could not only maximize the space in the container, but also predict how much product their clients needed within 6 months and a year, so that they could actually stockpile the products so that you wouldn't mess up the supply chain. As a result, they are one of the most successful importing companies in the world, which is, and it's just thanks to technology. And that's what I mean, right? Like, how do we actually use technology to make this world a better place through prospering business, right?
Yeah, and reducing costs and increasing profit, right? I think it really comes down to helping them make business decisions, right? That help them with every day, in their office.
Fantastic. Okay, so it looks like you have a lot of experience, and it hasn't been easy to go where you are, as a senior leader in technology. Let's start from the beginning. What were you doing your last year in high school? What was your mindset? Were you already in computers? Were you trying to go into computer science? What was it?
Yeah, so at the time, so there was actually, I think it was grade, I got into computers kind of late. I remember, talking to a kid in my class, and I took like 2 years of typing and then data processing and stuff. And I remember at the time, this was like grade 10 or something, I was like, I had an urge to put the phone book, back when we had phone books, into like an Excel spreadsheet, right? And my parents were both teachers. We had an Apple 2GS. But I didn't really know what software was, other than I'd used it and played games and things. It was around grade 12. I was either kind of going down the path of being like an architect or draftsman, to do drawings, for houses and things, or get into computer software. And then really by the end of grade 12, like going into back when we had grade 13, we don't have that anymore in Canada, but decided that I wanted to get into computer science, and changed my courses around a little bit, and ended up took programming and things like that, and then really just loved it. I love building things, and that's where I think the architect thing came too. But software is just so I don't know, it's always different, like applications are different, and you're always problem solving too, right? So I really enjoyed that, about writing software.
That first computer where you started experiencing spreadsheets and all that, was it text-based already?
Sorry, was it desktop based?
Was it only text-based, or was it with a mouse?
It was text-based. There wasn't, not too much GUI, right?
It's funny because you said that, the first computer that I used was an Apple IIe, and that Apple was the one that they would put in Space Shuttle.
Yeah.
Full text-based, but it was an Apple, and people don't even realize that when Apple started, it was a text-based operating system. It wasn't mouse-based.
Yeah. But yeah, and then it was like, by grade 13, I remember having a project in chemistry, where we had to do something chemistry related. And because I was loving software development, I made a game called Wheel of Chemistry, and I had like a little wheel, that spun around with different colors and stuff. And then there'd be like a chemistry phrase or whatever. So that was kind of cool.
What was the first programming language that you learned?
That's a good question. The first one, I think, I don't know. I think trying to think what it was in high school. At college, it was COBOL. I think COBOL, VB6, I think, or maybe VB4 or something like that at the time. But it was COBOL was kind of the first one, and I like that because it was kind of SQL sort of and coding kind of in the same place, and started falling in love with SQL too.
I know. Once I learned database programming, I never looked back. Yeah. For me, it was like, oh my God, you can actually create data structures where you can leverage information later on and do processing on the data to create a result. It was like, wow, it's amazing, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, like I was, mostly into, I guess, just happened to be where I was working too. I was working at the head office of M&M Meat Shops, and they were SQL Server, and so my boss was really the DBA, and so I kind of, I got to learn SQL Server really well. And it's interesting, like how it's, I guess, my career's gone, or my experience is gone, but I started being like, everything was always database first. I designed like the database tables to store whatever we needed to store. I was writing store procedures and views and things, and now I've kind of gone to where it's like almost entity first development, where I'm writing entities, and what does the modeling look like, and doing a lot more of the processing in the API, right? And then using caching or database, depending on, what makes sense, performance wise. But it's interesting just the way you learn, and, how things have kind of changed and stuff too, especially, with there being more and more layers now to applications, and it's not just, a big, thick, fat client. So, you have to spread things around, and certain things have, a place, and, or, should be in a certain place, I guess.
So I want to touch two things, because we met at M&M Meat Shops, and for people, there's so many businesses, but that company, when we were there, it was a $500 million company with over what, 500 stores across Canada or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's like 450 stores.
So big business, but when you actually look at the IT department, it was very small, and it's because technology, this is what technology does, right? It leverages so much value for companies when they apply it to serve a business need, right?
Yeah. I remember, like, one of the first things we did, because when I started there, I worked there part-time in high school, and so that's how, I guess, I used to work in promotions, but then I started doing, they had this thing called polling, and so every Sunday night we'd go in and like dial into all the stores using, I think it was it PC Anywhere or something like that? And we'd connect to some folder and then download some, data files, and then we'd process those and import them into SQL Server. But I remember I got there, and they had like, all these different shortcuts. Like, they had like 450 shortcuts that we had to dial into all these stores, right? And I think there was like, 3 of us that were kind of doing this on a Sunday night. And I remember that a lot of like the phone numbers were wrong, and just trying to like make things, I was trying to make this as easy as possible, right? So I went through and fixed everything, and like kind of automated as much as we could, so that I didn't have to, it wasn't as much manual work, and things just worked. And it really helped to get, because the biggest thing is they wanted to see, what their, margin was, and their sales and everything from that last week, right? And this is before, web services and things, right? Really out there. And so this allowed the business to really start, kind of making decisions, right? And seeing, stuff that was on sale, how was it, making, I guess, quicker decisions, right? Instead of having to wait to the month end and seeing how the month was, that they're able to now see, progress, weekly. And, now I'm sure they're probably getting daily things, but, back in the day, that it's just like you can see how the advances in technology have helped business, right? Kind of, as the years have gone, and things become more automated.
And and this was early 2000s, and I remember they had millions of people in their loyalty program, millions of people, and that was thanks to a database system. And like, for the audience, don't take things for granted. Like, things are so much more advanced now. Like like a web service, a database system, a gift card, for example, or a loyalty program. Those things were pioneered by great entrepreneurs in the 2000s, and one of them was Matt Poison, the owner of M&M Meat Shops, and nobody had more customers in their database than they did. It was a wealth of data that they actually turned it into a wealth of money.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, if you think back at that time, that's when air miles started coming out, right? And you're like, how do I, what am I getting? How do I get free stuff from air miles? But it's because they're using all that data, right, to figure out, your shopping habits and things like that, right? And it helps them. It's kind of like the start of AI almost, right? Like they're starting to figure out, but it's, people looking at it saying, when they, for them, okay, people who are the most, likely people to buy steaks, and if they buy steaks, what else do they buy, that sort of thing. And they can start, putting things on sale together, or figuring out what price, people want to pay. And, but it's all providing, I think, it's, in the end, it's all trying to provide a better service to your clients, right? And knowing your client better, which is really what it's all about.
Which was beautiful. I remember you and I were in charge to implement the gift, the gift card program. pioneering again, right? Like brand new. We had to interact. I remember like having this conversation with the VP of Finance saying, we have a problem. We have $2 million in the bank from gift cards that haven't been cashed in.
Yeah.
Imagine how much money like that organization make by leveraging technology. That's very tangible, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What happens after? What happened after M&M? Like, how did you advance your career?
So I think when I left M&M, that's when I came to work for DBC Smart Software, and then that eventually got that's where I worked as a developer for a couple of years and brought them .NET, and I made like a little portal and showed how. So that's essentially the place that I'm working now. It's just that there's been 2 acquisitions since then, right? So, I made a little web portal in ASP.NET, that connected into their SQL Server database to get, their contracts and tickets and things like that out. And then after that, I eventually went on to work with you, right, at ISU Corp. And did the consulting, where we worked with a lot of different companies that were a lot of them software companies, right, that had a new idea that they wanted to get something off the ground, and that gave me a lot of experience because there was so many new applications that we were starting, and you really learned, because a lot of times you don't get that experience of starting something from scratch. Like in the real world, it doesn't happen very often, right? Where there's when you're at a company, starting something from scratch. And so it was really cool to do that so many times, right? So you really get to learn, what makes a good application, the things that you need to think about when you do it, how to make things faster as far as, development goes from a start to finish, as far as a project, and managing different types of projects, right? And getting experience in credit card processing and lots of different areas of business, right? It's one of those things, I guess in my career, I've worked at a lot of different types of companies and I've worked on a lot of different types of software. And I think it's been good to give me experience in lots of different lines of business, right? But I would say that the majority of it's been business to business, right? With some, business to consumer. Trying to solve, business problems, I guess, right? And so I went from there. I ended up going to work for Lone Wolf Real Estate Technologies. And
that was like a project too, right?
And that was my first, I guess, manager job, where I'd been like a team lead before, senior architect, so I'd worked there for a couple of years, and then DBC Smart Software, where I was working, which then was acquired by OpenLink Financial in New York. They had a new president in, and they being owned by OpenLink, and that I guess they wanted to kind of get into some newer technology, right? And so they knew that I knew .NET. I also knew the business because I was there as a developer for a couple of years. And then I went back to start up an actual .NET department with them. So I hired my team. And then about it was like 7 months later, I ended up taking over all the development. So I became the senior director of development there, and took over basically all of ag tech development, which is the product that I work on.
What do you attribute your success? Because you went from being a senior developer architect into very senior leadership very fast. What do you attribute? Like how do you move up in the corporate ladder, being such a good technology leader so fast?
I think, the biggest thing I think that it is for me is that I think I bridge the gap. I'm kind of between, I've always one thing, I always get along with everyone. Like I've always gotten along with everyone, but I feel like I'm the glue that kind of keeps teams together, and just my people skills. So I'm able to relate to, the CTOs, C-level executives, right down to the people that are, the teams that are actually, doing all the work, right? And, whether they're technical or non-technical, I think just having good communication and, being a good person and trying to, always, just always doing my best, I guess, and inspiring other people and, and helping them, be the best person that they can be, right? And, giving them the tools that they need, being there when they need help, being one of the first, if anything needs help, I'm the first ones to get my hands in there and, help out. And, I really think it's, it's kind of like that. I would say it's a big combination of things, but the biggest thing I think is how I treat people. Regardless of who it is, I'll give everyone respect until, they show me that they don't deserve it, right? And I just treat everyone the how I would want to be treated, right? So I put a high bar for myself, so I put a high bar for everyone else. But I think, I get that back in return from people.
And it's because you're kind, and you touched in a really good point. Like you said, you inspire people to be the best they can be, and that's the main difference between a leader and a manager. A manager just goes and tries to get people to get the job done no matter what,
Yeah.
regardless of how they feel or what they are doing. You, on the other hand, you're inspiring people to achieve greatness through your own example.
Yeah.
So people actually are doing it because they want to, not because they have to. And that's how you retain people, and that's how you grow people, and that's how you actually become a great leader in technology.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm always, I think of my team, I guess, right? It's so, whether it be my kids or, my wife or something too, but I'm always thinking, okay, what is it for that person? And it's not just about me. Like, I think too, like, growing up, and, I played sports my whole life, right? Like high school, basketball, volleyball, baseball, in the summer, hockey. And I think I really saw the benefit of team, right? Everything was a team, right? The team either succeeds or it fails together, right? And I know sometimes I'll be like, talk to my wife and saying we, and she's like, no, not we, you. I'm like, no, it's we. Us. We're doing this together, right? But it's like like, especially to, you're especially with software development, everything's team based, right? And so it's like, not everyone's the same, right? So different people have different skills, right? And so trying to see the best in everyone and see what they can contribute to, right? And then things where they might struggle, you try to bring them up, or get them training, or encouragement to try new things and stuff. And by getting other people to do what you do, has kind of allowed me to kind of move up, I guess, right? Teaching them what I look at, and the things that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at software. What am I, what are the, some of my concerns or risks and things like that. Project management, capacity planning. Getting right from developers or QA or development managers, directors. Getting them to kind of trying to get them to think of how I think. And also learning from them, right? By no means I would say, I never would say that I know the answer. I'm only as good as the team that I have, right? And I can try to make that team better, but it's like, I rely on that team, and we really are doing it together. I don't I never pretend that I know all the answers. I know what I know from my experience, but really focus on making sure people have a say in things, and listening to them, because I think everyone has a different viewpoint. We've all come from a different place, and so it's sometimes I might come back as a leader. I'll be like, I'll hear what they have to say, and I'll be like, no, I'm still going to do it my way. But there's a lot of times where I'm like, actually, that's a really good idea, let's do that, right? And giving that recognition to people, I think is huge too, and not stealing it as my idea, right? And giving kudos, I guess, where it's due.
That's incredible, JT, and it shows that's why you actually grew so fast in your career, right? And it's like what's in it for your team, not only for yourself. Once you become focused on the entire group, not only being in a selfish way, that's when you start exploding in abundance, right? And it's not only for technology leaders; it's for the actual life, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go back into the New Testament, it says, "Love your neighbor as much as you love yourself."
Yeah.
If we follow that commandment, man, like there's nothing but abundance in our life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, what was the biggest problem that you ever had in a project, and how did you how do you find victory through that problem? I know there's many, but what's the biggest?
I think trying to think what the biggest problem would be. Well, I don't know. There was a couple. It's like I think the one that at least I had where I work now was so ag tech, our main flagship product. It's been in development for 25 years, right? And it's made with Power Builder, right? And so trying to integrate it with .NET, is extremely challenging because it doesn't have like, native like web service support or things like that, right? So, we've had to, solve it with technology, right? So we wrap, we have now Windows services where, it runs, Power Builder applications or .NET pieces where we can write, .NET, and it was very challenging, and where there's not a lot of documentation. Like, I think, especially with .NET or, the modern languages, you get so spoiled with examples, right? How do you do this? How do you do that? And so we really had to like do some kind of like R&D to figure out, what's the best way for this to happen. Is it, some things we, run into and found out, it's not multi-thread safe, right? And or supported. So like, trying to create like a web application with hundreds of users calling, it would like single thread it and chain up the commands and things, right? So that would be the one thing, I guess, we solved that with technology. Maybe another one would be we the Canadian Wheat Board. It's not a thing anymore, but used to be kind of government controlled, right? The buying and selling of grain, out west. And we had so they were like, was a huge undertaking, I guess, to bring them on, to our product. And I remember we did these like huge estimations, and it was like, just a crazy time of trying to we wanted to help this client, and it was huge for us to like get that client. And so sometimes you just have to go over and above, right? Or over and above, right? And everyone was working long hours and things like that. And in the end we ended up getting the client and finishing everything on time, which was awesome. But
Awesome.
the only way to get through it, like I learned, like, one of the first, I think, courses that I took after college was in project management, right? So project management and software development, and learning that and just how to manage projects. And like, I'm very detail oriented, so I'm like, I'll start planning out things kind of how things are would go. And this is in the days of waterfall, so it was kind of planned everything up front. Right now it's a little different with doing agile, right? So it's kind of
better, I think.
It's completely turned now, right? So it's I project management in a different way, but just kind of keeping an eye on that. And I think that's the biggest thing is having an idea how long things are actually are gonna take, and as a manager, trying to see through, because you get estimations from people all the time, but getting to know certain people that might underestimate things, some that overestimate things, and finding where that balance is in between. But I think that's been one thing where I've been pretty lucky that I have a good understanding of usually how long things take. So that I've had a pretty good track record of stuff getting done on time, where I'm not having to like force people to be working overtime and stuff like that, because that's never fun.
I know it's never fun, but because you're a great leader, when it's necessary, people do it, and they do it gladly, because they feel that they're being appreciated, right? And there's nothing better than a crisis to produce leaders, and then acknowledge those leaders. And I love those situations. I try to avoid it as much as I can, running great project management services, like you said, or creating realistic expectations across estimations, which is very hard to do, especially in software, because business people think that you push a button and everything happens at once, like it was a magic wand, and it's not. It's hard and complicated.
It's complicated, a lot of pieces, right? Yeah.
Oh,
and it's like around that same topic, it's like I've always tried to be flexible, I guess, with people. And so even before COVID had come, we were pretty flexible with people working from home, right? And it was funny at the time. I remember, like, one of my teams, they were like, oh, okay, that's great. And, they might work from home, 1-2 days a week. I had another team that, they could work from home, but they're like, no, we like coming in the office every day. But, if they had an appointment or things like that, like, I think it's about being flexible, right? And if I'm flexible with them, I'd hope that they're flexible with me, right? So then when something comes up that, we need them to kind of step up, they do gladly, right? Like, as you said, because they know that we're there. It's like we're there for each other, right? And I try not to make it where it's just I like to have fun, I guess, and too, when we're working, so it's a kind of a fun atmosphere, but make it not so much about just coming to work and doing your work. It's we're there to kind of achieve something together, right? And gives them a sense of purpose, I think.
That's beautiful. We know we have talked a lot about technology, and you mentioned a couple of things that I would like to clarify for the audience, especially for the business leaders that are listening to this. You mentioned Fat Client, and also you mentioned Power Builder.
Yep.
Can you explain what is that and what is the opposite of that?
Sure. So a fat client's kind of like you have let's think of a Windows application, right? You might have a Windows application and then a database behind it, right? But there's no APIs or no like layers in between, there. And so typically that would be kind of a typical what you'd say Windows program, right? Then came web development, where you'd have like a three-tiered approach, where you have a UI layer, which is what you'd see in a browser, right? So you'd see you see the HTML and CSS, and you're interacting with the JavaScript that gets downloaded to your browser, any web page basically that you go to, right? And there'll be a middle layer where it's like the API layer, right? So an API is where you're passing it data and telling it to do things, like for an example, you want to I don't know, if you're on Facebook or something, let's say you're getting a feed, you might be telling it to do a post, things like that. That's typically where all your business logic will reside, right? So it's doing all your validations and ensuring that the user that is connected has permissions to do things, and then you still typically have a database kind of behind that. So it's changed from like a fat client to a now a lot of the front ends, they're pretty there'd be a thin client where they're called I don't know, they're pretty dumb, right? But you get all of your middle layer, your API, helping to dictate what's in your UI, but also handles all the processing. So then when you want to let's say you're implementing a big system in your business, but you want to integrate with something. It was a little harder in the fat client days, right? You'd have to make some kind of import, or you'd be importing and exporting data, but a user has to go and do this, right? And so you'd be using like CSS or XML or something like that, where in a web-based or mobile, and you've got a set of APIs behind that. Now you can just pass data back and forth, so JSON or something like that, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of interact with that system. So you don't necessarily have to use that UI if you want to use like a third party for, say, a piece of it or something like that.
It's beautiful. Yeah, more flexible, more reliable too, right? Managed centrally on a database server that is on the cloud,
yeah,
protected by big firewalls, by the big providers. Instead of having everything your computer, if your computer dies, the data dies with it, and then you're done.
Yeah, and I think the one of the biggest things too, I guess, or one of the biggest benefits, I guess, that from it is around quality, right? So you really get to test it a lot better, with a thick client, or an old Windows program that doesn't have an API layer. I mean, it's still possible, I guess, with a Windows program, but it's hard to unit test, right? It's hard to put it through your quality process to ensure that it's working as designed, right? You have to do manual testing, right? So you have a QA that's sitting there and going through and clicking on this and doing that. You might have like a smoke test before you release a build to go through a certain set of situations. But especially when things are gone through an API, you've got your unit tests and integration tests, and it's all part of your continuous integration or CI pipeline, right? So now with everything kind of moving to SaaS, it's like we're to the point where we're doing code commits in our code repositories. When we do that, it's running all of our unit tests, all of our integration tests, running our UI tests in there too. We still do manual testing, but at the end, basically we'll publish it out, and everything just kind of takes it on from there. Like we just publish a build, and everything gets automated, right? So there's no more running an MSI or an EXE, to upgrade the application, and then upgrading a database and things like that. It's really just kind of automation all the way through, right? And it's trying to make things streamlined, right? So it's easier. And you get to promote things to production, and you also get repeatable results, right? Because that everything's been tested, right? So you're not spending all your time dealing with customer support cases and stuff when it comes in. You're hopefully finding these things up front, right? And making the best quality software that you can. because I know when you look back like 20 years ago when you write software, there's so many defects and things, right? It's like stuff just like didn't work right, and stuff like that. And think of all the, the hate that people had for Microsoft and Windows and the Office programs and things like that. And even with that, it's just not the same anymore, right? Things for the most part, work. So everyone's gotten a lot better there, but it's because it's a lot cheaper to put that investment up front, right? To test things, to make sure that it's working properly, versus waiting for it to become like a customer reported defect, right? That you then have to, goes through support and goes through, you have to, diagnose it and maybe get a customer database or something and then fix it. And you like that cost there is just like exponential, right? So it makes so much more sense to spend that time up front, so you can spend more time, on innovation, I guess, than you do fixing issues.
And I will deal with client with that because, when you put time for unit testing and also manual testing, they're like, why do we need that? I don't want to pay for it. And then I basically tell them either you pay for it now or you pay for it 10 times more expensive when you're in production and you have problems. Mm-hmm. Because the later you find the bug in the life cycle, the more expensive it becomes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How is that hard to convince clients of that? When you're
not
doing
anymore.
New software products? No.
Not anymore, especially clients that have gone through a cycle or process, or they have hired the wrong IT software company and they have been, screwed over by companies selling, smoking mirrors, saying, it's going to cost you 2 months when you know that the project is 6 months just to gain the client. Yeah. So reputable companies like us, like ISU Core, we always go up front and we tell them this is what it is. Yeah. There is a saying, an old Spanish king will say to the people that will dress them, he will tell them, dress me slow because I am in a hurry. And it's profound, right? Dress me slow because I am in a hurry. If you do it fast, you're going to make mistakes. And those mistakes are going to make you even slower than making it properly with the right mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, interesting.
Brother, I could speak to you the whole week if I had the time, but I want to respect your time. Thank you for being in the show. If people want to find out more about you, where can they find you?
Just on LinkedIn, I guess. You can find me there, probably the best place. You can just connect me there, send me a message.
LinkedIn, beautiful. And one last question before we finish the podcast. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Ooh, I don't know. Maybe treat people like you like to be treated yourself. I'm not sure. Something like that, or
that's actually
do your best or something. Yeah. Yeah.
This world would be so much better if people treat the people like they like to be treated themselves.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. For sure.
Brother, thank you so much. Wish you the best in your career and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.